For all of the VR games I've played, this is my first time ever using a VR Gunstock, so you're about to get a very real review of both of these, the Business Company VR Gunface and Pulsar VR Gunstocks. Shout out to Business Company VR, by the way, for sending me these with no strings attached to try out. In fact, they'll be finding out the same time as you guys that I ended up setting this thing on fire for reasons. But I've rambled enough, so let's get into this Gunstock review. To start with the unboxing, this thing showed up in a surprisingly small box. Honestly, I thought maybe they forgot a piece or two, but no, everything was packed in here. Inside, we have all of the pieces needed to assemble the gunstock, including 3 different size tubes that form the frame of the gunstock. 2 controller mounts thankfully marked for left and right controllers respectively, the butt of the gunstock that presses against you for stability, a couple of clips that hold the gunstock together and allow for adjustment, 2 surprisingly strong magnets that I didn't even realize were magnets at first, some little caps to cover your unused threads, and this little curved piece that I just call the banana. These pieces can be configured to make either the Gunface version, which uses the magnets and is going for $69.99, or the Pulsar version that uses the banana as a wrist rest and is going for $59.99. At first I thought this price was insane for a gunstock, but after doing a bit of digging and testing it under very normal use cases, I can see why it costs so much. Let's talk about what this thing is actually made out of. We've got some metal fasteners attached to 3D printed attachment pieces, and this part kind of surprised me, actual carbon fiber. Now, I was going to shoot off an email to the maker and ask what the tubes were made of, but my immersion scientist encouraged me that this was the only reasonable way to figure that out. If this was in fact some kind of plastic, it would have simply melted, but it didn't. In fact, the fibers themselves became obvious, and even after the test, the gunstock itself remained perfectly functional. In terms of feel, this thing is now unsurprisingly light, way lighter than it looks actually. It's easy to swing it around while still increasing that immersion factor of feeling like you're holding an actual weapon. That said, when you're bracing it tight against your shoulder, there's a bit of a squeak depending on how it's adjusted. Nothing crazy, just the kind of noise you'd expect when the joints of something are under pressure. Visually though, it looks pretty good. It's got that sleek, purpose-built gamer vibe without trying too hard. If someone walked into a room and saw this sitting on a table next to your VR headset, they'd have an easy time guessing what it's for. But I apologize because I've taken too long to answer the question of whether this is compatible with your specific headset. The short answer is yes, if you've got a Quest 2, Quest 3, or Quest Pro. Ordering is as simple as making sure you select the right version for your headset, and since a lot of these parts are 3D printed, they're designed to fit each controller model specifically. As a result, the pieces that hold the controller itself to the gunstock are actually the only real obstacle stopping you from using other VR controllers with this gunstock. Now, as far as it feels from game to game, that part's a bit more of a wild card. Some games are physical gunstock friendly with support baked right in. That doesn't always work, but it really depends on how well the developers implemented gunstock handling. But left-handed operators aren't left out here. This gunstock is ambidextrous thanks to how the mounts are put together. Just swap the positions of the left and right controller mounts and you're good to go. Now, once I actually got into a game and started moving around with the gunstock, one thought hit me almost instantly. VR guns feel way more stable with a gunstock. That in itself obviously makes sense. Having something that holds the controllers still and braces them against your body simply makes them shake less. As a result, you can expect increased accuracy at longer ranges. Also, credit where it's due, this gunstock itself is crazy versatile. You can adjust pretty much every part of it, which makes it easier to shape it into the same weapon you're using in-game. You can adjust the overall length of the gunstock by adjusting the fasteners. You can shift both controller mounts forward or backward. You can even change the buttstock angle so that it feels more in line with your gun. All of this can be tweaked relatively easily too. That said, there's a steep learning curve, and I mean steep. If you're like me and you've never used a gunstock before, that initial wow factor can quickly get cancelled out by actually gaming with it for the first time. Let's talk about the Gunface model first. This one uses magnets to hold your offhand controller in place, and at first this felt way more awkward than I expected. You can detach it with a quick tug, and this configuration makes sense for situations where you want a more immersive way of using 2 guns at one time. Now, there were 3 notable problems with this configuration for me personally. One was reattaching the magnet. To be fair, the more I played with this configuration, the less of a problem the magnet became. but initially it was very difficult to put the gun face back together between reloads. It nicely snaps into place when close to the other magnet, but even with magnets this strong, I found myself struggling to line it up. In all fairness, this got much better with practice, even if it didn't completely go away. The second problem was that reloading took a lot of practice with this thing. When using the foregrip, this thing was so immersive, I often found myself letting go of the entire controller to reload, which made for some awkward gunfights. This could be fixed with a controller cover similar to the one I had to remove for this Gunstock to work. The third was the magnet itself causing some weirdness with controller inputs. I can only assume it was the magnet since this only ever happened with the gun face version while testing. My controls spazzed out in both Tactical Assault VR and Contractor's Showdown Exfil Zone using this version. Those three problems aside, using this version felt great once I got the hang of it. Then we have the Pulsar version, which skips the magnets and instead uses a braced arm design. This means your offhand is always connected through your forearm, so there's no fiddling with magnets and your least dominant controller just simply stays in your hand. Sounds great on paper, and for the most part it was great in practice. Having that pressure on my arm initially didn't feel natural, but I quickly forgot about it halfway through the first round using it. This is my preferred version of this Gunstock, with my only problem being similar to the magnet situation when it comes to reattaching it. The banana definitely helps keep it in place on your arm, but without practice, just like with the magnets, you'll have a difficult time setting it properly on your arm. Regardless of the version though, it's clear that accuracy goes way up, especially at longer ranges. When you're trying to hold something steady in VR, something that gives you leverage like a Gunstock not only works but feels immersive. And that's the core value of a Gunstock, immersion and control. So after all the testing, tweaking, burning, and flailing around in VR, here's where I stand. The only real obstacle to this Gunstock being incredibly viable is the learning curve. There's a whole new set of muscle memories you've gotta muscle memorize, but once that clicks, the trade-off feels worth it for sure. The key is really configuring this thing to feel close to the size of the gun you're using in VR. When it lines up just right, it feels so natural that you almost forget you're using a Gunstock at all. Honestly, at first these Gunstocks felt meh, especially with how awkward the Magnum system felt early on. But after spending some real time with both of these models, I'd say yes to either. Especially if you're really into VR shooters, this is absolutely worth checking out. I'd probably lean more towards the Pulsar version over the gun face any day of the week, just because it felt more consistent for me personally. But it really comes down to the preference, and who knows, you might actually like the magnetic quick release system. Either way, thanks again to Business Company VR for making this surprisingly entertaining piece of VR equipment, and big thanks again for sending these over and allowing an honest review. Go ahead and hit that like button and definitely subscribe if you want to see more VR gear breakdowns. Link in the description to both of these Gunstocks, but they sell more than just Gunstocks, so check out their store. Thanks for watching, and until next time.
If you don't get it this time, I'm divorcing you.
This is bomb expert calling divorce.